After 8 years, the Hunger Games are back, but they're in the past? With the 10th annual Hunger Games, this shows the sympathetic but still kind of hateful rise of Coriolanus Snow. The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes presents a story that is worthy of the world of the Hunger Games.
No, I am the father.
And here we go.
That belongs in a museum.
Are you telling me that you built a time machine? Out of a DeLorean?
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
This is Sparta!
Remember, with great power comes great responsibility.
Dr. Grant, my dear Dr. Sattler, welcome to Jurassic Park.
Welcome back to Easily Entertained. I hope you had a great Thanksgiving. I am your host, Bryson Olson, and we're here to talk about all things entertainment. It's always a good time. Today we are talking about the new Hunger Games movie, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. It takes place long before the events of the original trilogy. It takes place during, I believe, the 10th annual Hunger Games, and it kind of gives us a bit of the backstory on Snow and why he's so evil and why he hates the district so much. But I feel like they did it justice. I never read the book, but my mom has, and it sounds like things are fairly accurate. Obviously, you sometimes have to change things for the movie adaptations, but for the most part, it seems like they follow the books fairly well. And I feel like they do that with the main trilogy as well. The books by Suzanne Collins, they seem to just follow along pretty decently. Like, obviously, you have to adjust some things for movie adaptations just because you can't have every story the exact same in every medium. It's not always going to work that way. So, yeah. And especially because with this medium, it's typically a longer kind of medium. This movie is about 3 hours. And we all kind of know how I feel about 3-hour movies. I'm not usually very on board. And this is because 3 hours tends to be really long, and you can kind of tend to have really bad pacing issues. You can have too much filler, which kind of goes along with pacing, but it's just harder to really keep you captivated for those entire 3 hours. And this movie, it's not exactly 3 hours, but it's 2 hours, 45 minutes. So it's still a pretty long movie, but I feel like the way they do it is somewhat justifiable. They kind of break it down into individual parts so that each story is more contained, and you hit those beginning, middle, and ends several times throughout the film. And then each part is a beginning, middle, and end. So that's how I think stories should usually be broken down. If they're going to be long, you have to give them those little checkpoints, essentially, so that you can still be very captivated, but stick around for 3 hours of a movie. And so with that, let's talk about it. So this movie was definitely to establish Snow as a lot more of a sympathetic character. Like, you know, he's going to be evil, and it's like those typical movies where it focuses more on the villain. You know they're going to turn evil eventually, but you know, like any dictatorship, you got to be able to feel some kind of sympathy for the leader. But they established Snow very much as a sympathetic character, but a symbol for the capital. He himself is poor, but his dad was well known, so they weren't always poor. The family wasn't, but they are currently poor. He is ambitious. He still wants to make a name for himself, but as per the rest of the capital, they are a bit prejudiced towards the rest of the districts, because the districts at one point rebelled against the capital, and to set up the Hunger Games, it was meant to be a punishment. It's meant to show, hey, we will kill you if you step out of line. So that's kind of why they do it. And they kind of go more into it in the movie. And so if you haven't really seen that part, you should go watch it, which, spoiler warning right now, there's a lot of spoilers throughout this episode. So you may want to watch The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes first before you come and listen to this episode. Just saying. But we also have our side character, well, supporting character, supporting lead, essentially, Lucy Gray. She is from District 12, and she's kind of a part of this group of essentially gypsies. They kind of are wanderers, but they've been stationed in District 12, and they can't really leave. And she is meant to be a sympathetic character as well, alongside Snow, but instead of a symbol for the capital, she is obviously a symbol for the districts, where community is really important. They care for people. They really hate the tyranny of the capital. They're free roaming until, of course, the capital comes around and is like, no, you get to stay here. You don't get to go anywhere now. But even though they kind of hate the capital, they still kind of treat the capital as humans when they see them. They aren't exactly like out to kill them. Like, they don't really like them, but they still treat them as humans. Whereas the capital, when the tributes first come in, they're basically put into a zoo, because before, everything is like a big spectacle, a big event where like they're basically celebrities. It was just, we got to weed out symbols in the districts. And so in this, they're basically thrown into like a zoo for the days before the actual Hunger Games. And so that kind of establishes the symbols of the series. Capital, sympathetic; district, sympathetic. And you still, for the most part, sympathize with the districts, because obviously they are very oppressed and they're all living way worse than the capital is. But you still feel slightly sympathetic for the capital because of Snow. You see that although it's really rich, and it's just like parallels for modern day society, you can have very rich areas but still have people experiencing either homelessness or poverty. And so it's that kind of aspect that lets you sympathize with both characters. And then this beginning part of the movie, Snow is meant to be a mentor. That's essentially what it kind of starts off with. He goes to a school, and all these top level students are supposed to be mentors. They're supposed to get donations. They're supposed to get people to watch the Hunger Games. And Snow is paired up with Lucy Gray, who he eventually falls in love with. And he is trying to make her seem as sympathetic as possible to the capital. He wants people to donate money. He wants her to be the fan favorite and let her live and win so that he can get a prize. Which brings us into Act 2. So the first act, it was called The Mentor. We established that he's trying to help his tribute win. And it's kind of because that's the goal of their class assignment. In Act 2, we have the prize, where Snow is still trying to win the prize, like monetarily, so that he can kind of make a better life for his family. But he now starts to empathize with his friend, who believes that tributes are still people. And this is not a very common ideology in the capital. And so Snow starts to kind of empathize with him as he develops feelings for Lucy Gray, because she is very much about people. She's taking care of the other tributes. So he realizes that they are people and they still care about each other. They're not just savages. So he wants to protect her. He wants to empathize with all the rest of them. And so with that, though, Snow still will do anything to win. His empathy does not surpass his ambition. It doesn't surpass his prejudices against the districts. And so he starts to become a little bit more selfish rather than selfless. And you can see that this was always a part of his character, because in the Hunger Games trilogy, it's very much obvious. Snow cares about himself. He cares about his immediate family, and that's about it. He doesn't really care about anyone else. He doesn't care about the districts. He doesn't want a revolution. He believes the capital is right and should be in charge. And so you kind of get to establish that within this movie. He cheats to make Lucy Gray win. He gives her rat poison, and in this movie there's some snakes that are very deadly, but if you get them acclimated to a scent, like with a cloth with the scent of someone on it, you won't be attacked. And so he puts a cloth that he used to wipe her face of tears in the snake tank. But he wasn't supposed to do that, because obviously not. You shouldn't be cheating. And he kind of realizes that, actions have consequences, and, he thought he would really get away with it, but he did not. So you kind of go through the second act, learning a lot more about the consequences of Snow's actions. He is very clever. He's definitely a smart guy, and he does understand people. And I think that's the main thing that you have to take away in the Hunger Games, is that these are people, and you're trying to connect with other people to get them to watch. Snow, although he doesn't really care for the districts, he understands how the people in them work and how the people in the capital work. And it's kind of like advertising. You gotta use what you can to make people feel a lot of sympathy for these characters. Lucy Gray in particular, she's sort of innocent. That makes you want to root for her. You're like, okay, I don't agree with everything you're saying, but I do like the underdog. I want to see where it goes. And so Snow is very much using this to make her win, and he wants her to win. But essentially the professor is kind of against him. He doesn't want him to win. And because he's falling in love with the tribute, he will kind of go out of his way to make sure they don't win. And all the while, there are rebels trying to ruin the Hunger Games and everything. And so it's kind of a Hail Mary, just let's kill everybody. There may not be a victor. And so Snow is trying to make his win at any cost, but make it seem like it's because Lucy Gray is smart and not because he is smart. And so with that, you have these kind of cheating ways to do it. But like I said, actions do have consequences, but along with that as well, Snow is very clever, and he will turn them into good consequences. He knows how to get around people. And so that brings us into the final part of the movie, the Peacemaker. This is when he thinks he's gotten away with cheating, but of course they caught him. It wasn't that hard. They found the little mirror thing with rat poison that was once used by his mom. They find the cloth that has his freaking initials on it because dude's an idiot. Like, bruh, should have just chopped your initials off and then they wouldn't have ever known. It would have just been a mystery. And people would have thought it was because Lucy Gray sung that the snakes didn't bite her. Because she establishes earlier in the movie that she sings for a snake when she was young and it doesn't hurt her. And so people could have believed this myth. But he's an idiot. Although a clever one, still somewhat of an idiot because he didn't realize these mistakes. And so he gets caught, obviously, and then his punishment is to become a peacekeeper. They basically are like, well, you guess you're never going to see her again. That sucks for you. But once again, Snow has selfish reasons and he will do kind of anything to get what he wants. So he bribes the commanding officer that is assigning him to a district. He's initially supposed to go to District 8, I believe, 8 or 9. But he bribes him and say, hey, can I go to 12? And so he gets to be assigned there. And when he gets there, he kind of quickly establishes that he's a pretty smart guy. It's a kind of a shock that he's in District 12. Like, obviously, he has to have made an enemy, and that's what he even says to his commanding officer. He's like, well, I made enemies, and so they kind of have sent me out here as a punishment. But part of it is true, and part of it is a lie, because he wasn't supposed to go to 12, but he did. And so when he's in 12, we do start to empathize with him a little bit more as well, because he starts to learn how it really is in the districts and how their feelings are towards the capital. He realizes that obviously they're kind of oppressing the districts, and he doesn't agree with all of it, but he still thinks this is better than war. And granted, partially it is, but oppression is still bad. So he's still kind of in that capital mindset where he thinks they are right and he's just part of that system that makes it right. And then he meets up with Lucy Gray because she's back in District 12, even though He thought she may have been killed because they cheated, but that was Snow's fault. It wasn't really her fault. And so he starts to fall in love with her some more and empathizes with her because he sees through her eyes what the districts are all about. They even make a plan that they might leave. But when they make that plan, it initially happens because there are rebels that are trying to leave. But there becomes a bit of an issue. One of the girl rebels that's supposed to leave is the mayor's daughter, who at the beginning of the film wasn't a big fan of Lucy Gray. And so she kind of threatens to expose him as a deserter. And as a result, he kills her. Snow kills mayor's daughter. And this is kind of where Snow starts to fall into a bit of a descent of madness. He goes a little bit crazy as things start hitting the fan. And so he keeps deciding, he's like, it'll be fine, it'll be fine. There's only a couple loose ends, and they're not going to say anything. Snow will take care of it. Relationship, you kind of want them to work out, even if things go a little bit bad. But it gets even worse. So when he kills the mayor's daughter, and then he doesn't kill a rebel. He sort of does. He hides they get the guns hidden. Snow doesn't really know where they are. But his friend, who was empathetic with the people from the beginning, is trying to plan this breakout. So to give himself an alibi, Snow records his friend using a jabberjay about his idea to break someone out of prison and then run off. And of course, that causes his friend to be hung, and one of the other rebels was captured with information saying that there was a capital Peacekeeper that was in on the escape plan. And so, Snow kind of puts him up, and they're like, well, you're going to die. And he feels bad. It was his friend, and they were good. They were really good friends, but self-preservation. He's still in it for his selfish reasons. He wants him and Lucy Gray to be able to run off. And so after his friend dies, they kind of make this plan, and they're like, we're going to run. We're going to go, and they're supposed to be going where like District 13 was. They're supposed to just run off. But things go a little crazy. Lucy is a loose end. It's where things are going a little bit nuts because Snow doesn't want things to go bad. What if he wants to return to the capital? He can't have any loose ends. He can't have the liability that someone can take over or rat him out. And so Lucy kind of runs off, and, it's a what will happen kind of situation. Is she going to die? Is Snow going to die? Who knows? Because obviously, Snow doesn't die because he's in the other movies. But you're kind of wondering how things are going to play out. But he kind of looks like he shoots Lucy, but then she disappears. And then he's trying to find her, but he can't. And so when he can't find her and he realizes that she knows he's a bad guy, he decides to take a promotion from his commanding officer, saying that he should go up to the higher districts and then eventually back to the capital. And so Snow kind of decides, screw Lucy, not literally, and goes off to do his own thing. And, he kind of eventually makes it back to the capital, and he makes it into the higher society of the capital. And you kind of end with this almost poetic kind of line, because Snow is obviously this very clever guy, and throughout the film, he is the protagonist. Granted, he's a bad guy, but he is the protagonist of the film. So he's getting what he wants. So he ends with this line, Snow lands on top. He has got what he has wanted. He knew what he was going to do from the get-go. And although it was bad, he did make it happen. And so Snow did land on top. He is at the capital in higher society again. And of course, he eventually becomes President Snow. That I don't really know how it goes. I don't think they really explained it in the movie. But it's kind of interesting. His motives progressively change throughout the film. And I think that's due to this 3-part storytelling that lets him change his motives from being more selfish to a bit more selfless to help Lucy Gray, but also back to being selfish for his own personal gain. And because of that flip-flop back and forth, he kind of tends to lose his mind. And then he starts grasping more for his own goals rather than others. And so, you know, he kind of wants to control things. He doesn't really like being a part of the districts. He doesn't like being told what to do. So he decides, screw it, he's going to go back to the capital. And so it was just interesting to see this kind of story arc that goes across the whole movie, because it is kind of long. But it really lets you develop this character and realize, oh, it was very early in his life that he became so bad, that he became evil and became more of a tyrant than anything. And, you know, obviously you don't always want to sympathize with the villain, but in these kind of things where it's more politically based, where Snow isn't necessarily always a bad guy, but he does have some really bad tendencies and bad ideas on how to solve things, it's interesting to see how those ideas come about. And that's what I really liked about this movie and why I think it fits really well with the rest of the Hunger Games. I don't think everyone will agree with me, but I think it's really good. And I enjoyed how they connected it with the rest of the universe. So yeah, that was the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. And before we go, of course, we have the question of the week. This is, of course, Hunger Games based, not specifically on this movie, but kind of as the universe overall, because the Hunger Games were an annual thing that lasted for like 75 years. I was curious, what would your Hunger Games strategy be? Do you think you would try and hide? Do you think you'd immediately go for weapons and try and kill people? How do you feel you would do in the Hunger Games? Personally, I don't know if I would fare well with the fighting aspects of things, because, you know, that stuff sucks, and there's a chance that you can get hurt, and then you're kind of screwed, even if you win the fight. And so I think kind of the best strategy is to be more tactical with it, kind of more like Peeta in the first Hunger Games movie, where he's disguising himself, or you kind of hide and pick your targets to be more selective and not make yourself a target. It's more like a stealth kind of thing. I think that would probably be my strategy, and I think that would personally be the best strategy to go with. But I don't know. What do you think? How would you survive the Hunger Games? What would your strategy be? Let us know either in the comments below if you're on YouTube, on Spotify, Instagram, wherever. Just let us know what your Hunger Games strategy would be. And with that, that is the end of this episode. Thank you so much for listening. Go check out our Instagram if you want some more entertainment things. Check out our YouTube if you want the visual version of this podcast. It's always a good time, and we have captions on there, which makes it even better because then you can read along. Because if you're like me and you're watching movies, I always have to have the captions on to understand anything that is happening. But that's just me, you know. But with that, that's the end of this episode. We'll be excited to see you back next time. And until then, see ya. You have been entertained.